So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacey, and I am the Digital Marketing Manager here at Future Anthem. For those who have attended our previous events, thank you for tuning in again. For those who are attending for the first time, welcome. We're honored to have you all here to join us today. Before we start, let me share with you how Tune Into Data came to be. In 2019, Future Anthem was born. Our mission was to create a brand new strategy that empowered operators and studios to deliver never seen before outcomes for their players. We called this category game data science. In less than 2 years, game data science is now being proclaimed as the new Northern Star of the gambling industry, and we couldn't be any prouder. While working with some of the industry's best and most forward-thinking brands, including Gamesys, Betfred, Entain, and Paddy Power, to name a few, we have managed to ingest 35 billion player transactions. Earlier this year, we won an EGR award for Rising Star, and more recently, we have been honored by being recognized as one of the UK's fastest growing AI-driven scale-up businesses in the coveted Tech Nation Applied AI 3.0 program. Whilst this is all romantic, the one thing that was always important to us as a business was to give back to our community. We wanted to create a space that allowed the sharing of insights into the science of the possible, so that it educates and inspires our fellow professionals. For this reason, we have created Tune Into Data. So that's enough about us. Let's focus on what's going on today. I'm really excited to introduce to you two leaders that I know you will love. Firstly, we have Jason Nash, who is a well-respected product leader with an equally impressive heritage, working for some of the world's leading brands such as Microsoft, Sony, Barclays, and Travelport. Joining Jason is our very own Chris Conroy. And for those of you who don't know, Chris is not only the Chief Data Officer at Future Anthem, but also an industry leader, and often can be seen speaking at industry events such as Big Data London, plus many others. So without further ado, let's move on to the reason why we're all here. Today's conversation is about how to design products with data the Netflix way. I'm going to hand over to Chris and Jason, who will expand more on the subject.
Thanks very much, Stacey. I'm not sure we can possibly do that introduction justice, but we'll do our best. So yeah, I think on the topic, we tend to call it data-driven design, partly because there's some nice alliteration. But I guess the concept of data-driven design is something that has probably been about the gambling industry for quite a while. Everybody wants to design a product with data. And then I think if you look in the wider world, it feels like something that has been talked about a lot recently. And it's talked about as if it's quite a new concept. I guess our view would be, and especially when we look at the data science world and the world that we come from, big data, is that in essence, it's actually been around for quite a long time. And a lot of the big tech companies, one of whom you just mentioned, we would probably say, began their business through data science and actually data-driven design. So people like Netflix, Spotify, and Amazon, like Google, before the big companies started it all, and they brought machine learning into product is what we would argue. So actually, data-driven design, I would say, isn't a new thing. It's actually quite old, and it's been around since almost the beginning of what we would call commercial data science. So that's kind of my thoughts, but that's quite a kind of data science centric view. And it's we've got Jason here to give us much more of the product expert view. So kind of keen to know Jason's initial overview.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole product management area is an interesting one. People have different views of what product management does in an organization, but at its root, it's about being the voice of the customer, understanding what the customer wants and needs, and their jobs that they have to get done in their day-to-day life. A lot of businesses are building features without really maybe understanding whether that feature is something the customer really wants. And so at the heart of that decision-making process is some form of data and analysis, whether that's a one-on-one telephone call with a customer, asking them about their interpretations of a wireframe or an idea, or it might be about a more in-depth sort of data-driven decision where we're using that data to really help us make great informed decisions. I think the challenge for a lot of product people is getting that balance right and understanding how do I find out how my winning game over here or my winning product over here, how do I make that happen again? You know, so often with features and functions in products, we build the new feature and then we wonder, you know, who's using it and why are they using it? And in the same way in the game world, it's about really understanding, you know, what is the intrinsic reasons for why people are making those decisions, and data can really help us see into that a little bit like a sort of looking glass to be able to see through what often appears to be a very complex view, but actually with the right insights can actually become quite transparent and easy.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's interesting the way you articulate it, because data-driven design can sound a very complex thing. You know, how do we take these, you know, millions or billions of data points to make products? But actually, the way you describe it, you know, we fundamentally still look at what does the customer need, how do we communicate to the customer, what are the pain points we need to solve, and how are we going to do that? And again, I think that kind of the ability to just look at those individual customer touch points is still the most critical. So I think, you know, I mentioned a minute ago about the kind of history of this, and, you know, it feels like a cliche to talk about Netflix, because, you know, every big conference talk or every webinar around data or technology, it feels like they somehow reference Netflix. But I think, you know, it's important for me to think about, you know, the companies that have been at this for a long time. And I think, you know, Netflix have got a brilliant quote that you'll find on the kind of research part of our website, where they say, you know, we don't have one product. We actually have 100 million different products for our 100 million different members. And I think they recognized very early on, you know, whereas in the early days, everybody thought that Netflix, you know, their product was the entertainment content. I think they figured out that their product was really the recommendation algorithms that personalized that homepage for you. And, you know, in a very similar way, you know, everybody thought in the early days that Amazon's product was the millions of different books or different things that they sold. And in reality, their product was the ability to understand which of those things you might like. Again, basically just recommendation. So I think, again, from my view, you know, these companies like Netflix and Amazon, you know, right back in the early 2000s, we're already figuring out that algorithms could deliver products and I guess data-driven design. But I look at the world, you know, 20 years later, and it doesn't feel to me like, you know, we've moved into a place where everybody's doing data-driven design. So again, my question to you, Jason, based on, you know, what you said initially about what people should be doing, you know, what do you see out there in terms of, you know, what people are actually doing and whether companies actually are delivering data-driven design, or whether this is still, you know, a great idea and, oh yeah, Netflix are good at it, but what about everybody else?
So, I mean, you raised some really important points there, Chris. And I think one of the things is that, you know, people lose sight of what business they're actually in, right? Do you understand what your core competency as a business is? What are you here to do? You know, you mentioned Netflix, you mentioned some of the other businesses there. I'll throw Apodo into that list as well, right? Apodo, the e-commerce business, again, big users of data to get their products right. They realized they weren't in the we're an outsourced e-commerce business. They realized they were in the data business, and they used that data to actually help to differentiate their core product offering. And I think this is, you know, one of the problems that many businesses, whether you're in the gaming industry or outside of it, people lose sight of what is the actual job that I'm here to do. What is the product that I'm delivering? How is that making customers' lives easier, and how is it adding value, not for me as a business, but for the customers that are actually using my product? So really taking that player-centric view and really understanding, how can I make that customer delighted? How can my features and functions really sort of touch and make that person, that group of players, have something that they really want? You know, and many people, when you think about product, you have to start with understanding who is the audience. If you don't have clarity on who that person is, and what are you trying to solve their problem for, it becomes very hard to know whether you've done a good job with the game or the product that you're delivering. And so by having that ability to segment and understand who your existing customers are as the starting point, this is how many businesses do this really well. Seth Godin, who's a great author, if people haven't heard of him, I can highly recommend pretty much every single one of his books. A little time back talks about mass market and how in the past it was always about the mass market. You did mass market advertising. Now it's no longer about the mass market, right? Television adverts, are increasingly trying to figure out how they target the individual, target the smaller and smaller pieces. And in years gone by, it was very inefficient to do individual product or individual feature targeting because we just didn't have the technologies and the tools to be able to do this. But of course, these are the very tools that game data science unlocks for the gaming industry through the capabilities that Future Anthem are making available, right? So just as we're talking about Netflix or we're talking about Apodo's distinctive competency and how they're making that come to the forefront, it's the technology that you guys are working on that can do the same in the gaming industry. What people have got to do is they've got to realize that this opportunity is here now and they need to act on it sooner than later. Far too often you see people, they talk about cloud computing, wow, what a great idea, but it's not for us. We can't take it on right now, too risky, scary about the whole data being in the cloud, somebody might grab it, right? But the reality is those businesses that seize that opportunity early on are the ones now that are actually, delivering transformational revenue numbers and delivering, great customer experiences. So far too often people sort of, they see the new opportunity, but either through, fear, uncertainty and doubt, FUD, and they often just don't decide to embrace it. And so, this is really why we really, sessions like this are about trying to get people to understand this opportunity is real, it's here today, and, take it with both hands, really.
Yeah, again, really interesting. So again, just picking out some of the key themes. I think again, it all sounds like things we've talked about for a long time, that focus on, in the e-commerce world, customers, but in the gaming world, players. And I think it's actually one of the biggest revelations, that real kind of like granular understanding of players that came to me personally, within Future Anthem. I've been in the industry for a long time, and I used to work for an operator. And what I figured out once I started with Anthem and once we started going really deep inside casino games was that there was a lot of player experiences that even in my long time in the industry that I just didn't properly understand. And the biggest one, for casino and specifically for slot games is that many players have quite a bad experience. And it sounds a bit crazy to say it, but again, not only many, the majority of players, if they are, not having a very long session, have quite a bad experience. And, again, the Netflix analogy would be that they figured out that they've got kind of somewhere between 60 and 90 seconds, they think, to hold someone's attention when they first look at a title. And actually the casino industry is very similar. We found that the key point of customer churn on a slot game for a new player is actually around 10 to 15 spins, which is similar to that 60 or 90 seconds. But when you go deeper inside it, and I don't want to get too deep into mathematics, but the mathematics of slot games will tell you that you kind of need a player to have a longer session, to have a kind of better experience because of the way that the math works. So what you realize is, and it's still the biggest issue in the gaming industry, the biggest issue in gaming is still, player retention, player churn, player activation, all those different parts of the journey. So yeah, we found that going right into that, granular and almost atomic view of a player, which is, not looking at their LTV, not looking at their segment, not looking at, who they are like, but actually looking at the individual session. Many of them have quite a bad experience. And, I guess data-driven design to us then becomes, well, how do you design games and experiences that mitigate that in some way? Now, of course, many players have great experiences and that's great, but, we do find pockets of players that we think data-driven design needs to solve for, and that we think, certainly in my experience, my 7 years as an operator hadn't actually figured out yet, which is a bit scary and maybe a bad reflection on me.
I mean, I would say, Chris, you bring up an interesting point there, right? Which is, it's all about the customer segments. And I always say to people, in product, you often think about having a user persona and a buyer persona, right? And you think about behind every one of those personas, which is a kind of fictional character that doesn't really exist, there is a real person, right? A real person with feelings and emotions and insecurities and all those other bits and pieces that we all carry around with us as baggage. But actually, we're all kind of, we're all wired up in a similar kind of way, right? If you've ever looked at any of the behavioral economics or the heuristics that exist, a lot of good customer experience, user experience is designed around these common traits that we all have in the way we think and approach things, So whether it's, anchoring in terms of things that, might anchor somebody's thought processes. But I think what becomes really interesting when you start to apply the science to that is you can understand that how do I make people walk away from this feeling really great, right? How do I give them a good experience? It's not hard. Actually, you just need to give them a bit more value, give them a bit more time, give them things that are going to make them feel happy and delighted at the end of the process, right? So that's where the heuristics start to come into the way we think about design for games, but design for products as well. I mean, I've been working with you guys a little bit over the last few months, but I'm not a game expert by any stretch of the imagination. And what some of you guys do and what you do with games really, baffles me sometimes. But a lot of the same principles apply in pure product management as well. And I think, behind all of the work to create a product is this idea of how am I adding value to the person, not extracting value, but adding that value in. Because if you make it a valuable experience for them, they will come back and they will engage with the product more and more. And that's the same for every product, whether that's Netflix, whether that's Facebook, whether that's Google, right? You think about it. The reason we use those products is we personally get a great experience from what we do by engaging with that. And so this is the thing that most businesses lose sight of. They're too focused on how do I make the money. But if you deliver the great experience and you capture the customer and you turn them into advocates for you and your products, the money comes as a secondary thing. I always say to people, don't chase the revenue, chase the customer experience first. The revenue will come. It's just the same as NPS being a leading measure for future sales. If you've got delighted customers, they will come back to you again and again and keep buying from you. So, use those things as leading indicators to help you make those good decisions.
Yeah, and again, I think some of the things you mentioned there are actually so relevant for our industry in gaming. So, I think one of the things you mentioned at the end about the, almost not to badly misquote Kevin Costner, but if you bring the customers right, the revenue will come. But I think for the gambling industry, historically, I think the industry recognised a number of years ago as in general that there was too much reliance on a small cohort of relatively high value players. And I think there's been a massive push in the industry in general to really, have a much larger customer base of, recreational players. And I think everybody realizes that, that's where everybody wants to be and wants to get to. But to get to that, as you say, how delivering experiences across that much larger volume of customers. And I think, that's where that other point about delivering a great experience. Obviously, we have the slight, differences of our industry, not differences, but, USPs of the industry, I guess, whereby, players will play a casino game and ultimately take the whole player base on a given day. There is, it's a zero-sum game, right? Some players will win and some players will lose because that's the product. Where I think we then have to move to, and I think where we definitely are and where a lot of companies are getting to is you need to add the personalization side to the product design side. So, we can design great games, but ultimately some players will have a poor day on a certain game. But that's where the personalization should kick in, recognizing that as that player leaves that session, they might have not had the best luck on that day, and being able to intervene with that player to say, we realize you didn't have great luck today, but here's something else. And that doesn't need to be a marketing offer. It might just be you talked about behavioral economics. Behavioral economics would tell you that you don't need to bonus a player because they had a bad experience. Just recognizing that they might not have had great luck today is a good step on the way, and personalizing to say, here's a different game that you might be worth trying, and maybe we do give them some free spins along the way. But again, I think I guess the combination of personalization with data-driven design is really where I think everything's getting towards.
I mean, free spins are the equivalent of discounting, right? To an extent, in your traditional product market fit. So many businesses resort to discounting as like their standard way of operating, right? And we've seen this in businesses, the car industry, right? Look at the last few years in the US, that the major car brands have stepped back from this, but at one point they were discounting as their, the new model was discounted on day one, right? This is kind of like a fundamental misunderstanding of, is your product a good fit for the customer? Because if you've got to discount it on day one, it's probably not the right solution that you build there. So, taking a non-gaming example, how do you actually make a better product in the first place? So you don't need to discount it. And it all comes down to this really intrinsic understanding of what is it that these people want. When you think about the gaming industry, it's like, who am I competing with? Well, I'm actually competing with, I am competing with Spotify and Apple Music, because some people want to have a recreational time of listening to that. Might be competing with getting in my car and driving around for an hour, right? It's understanding intrinsically that core thing that we're trying to do for the customer, the player, and figuring out how do I make that valuable to them, right? Yeah. And so that there may be bells and whistles that actually even exist outside of where the traditional games are operating today, that by layering in some of those things, you might actually find, new winning formulas for games that just didn't exist before, right? If I take an industry where I again, don't have a lot of experience in terms of working with it, but I play PC games from time to time. There are genres of games that have built up over time, but they are playing to those same needs that we have as individuals about maybe feeling powerful or empowered or, whatever. And I think this is it. It's understanding how do we use the data to really put ourselves on a front foot to make really great experiences. Yeah,
no, exactly. And I think on those gaming examples you said, I think it's absolutely the case. The competitors to the gaming industry are essentially entertainment options, right? It's everything from the cinema back in the day. Remember those? But the cinema to football to Netflix and Amazon Prime, right? It's all of these, because ultimately, and again, to go back to the kind of behavioral economics, right? We're talking about people gamble because they want to spend a certain amount of money for the utility of that entertainment, and again, I think retail, a lot of the retail gambling kind of operators, casinos, bingos, have probably been a bit closer to this than digital historically, where they're much closer because they physically see the people coming in at 7 p.m. every Friday. It's that they're closer to that concept that it's just another entertainment option, and that's what we're competing with. And then I think it's really interesting you mentioned PC games, because I think definitely a big and understandable trend in the casino game industry over the last few years is a lot of games that are starting to borrow from the type of PC games that people are playing, because of course there's a big crossover between those two industries. We have a new generation of casino players coming into the market who have got expectations that have been formed by those games, and I think there's some really good examples in the gaming industry of. We were looking at some of the team today where you know, it's like, this feels more like a social game than a casino game. There was worlds and there was levels and there was leveling up, and I think, you know, the convergence of, you know, social gaming and casino gaming is something that will be a really interesting thing to watch over the next few years. And again, as we look at those different generations coming through into casino games, something that again we need to really take that data-driven design approach into.
I mean, you mentioned that like ideas spreading from one place to another, right? There's been some really interesting research where, you know, management teams that play collaborative PC games and actually support each other rather than end up with the other person dying or whatever, has actually been shown to be a really good trait for leaders in teams that are going to actually be supportive of each other and actually, you know, be good team members, as well as, you know, want to move the business forwards. So it's really interesting, you know, we talk about diversity in business and why it's an important thing. Well, the reason I think people often lose sight of, which is it's that melting pot of ideas, right? It's all of that mixture of people's personalities, all of those cognitive biases, all of that information. That's where the magic happens in product, and in my opinion, in game design. It's where you bring all of this great stuff together and you use data and analytics to actually help you see the trends, test the hypothesis or the assumption, and then go and create some experiments to make better products, better games, whatever that is. You can't do that properly unless you've got really good insights in how your existing products are working and what are the buttons that are being pressed by that. So, you know, for me, starting with understanding what your existing product or game does and really having that depth of understanding has to be the basis for how you then go forwards to figure out what's going to make a better game in the future or a better product in the future.
Okay, so again, very interesting.
Right.
I'm afraid I think I've got about 10 seconds to try and sum up that whole conversation before I pass back to Stacey. So I guess all I'll say is, you know, of all the things Jason said, the thing that jumped out to me the most is almost, you know, we've got all these billions of data points and we can absolutely build models to synthesize them to deliver much better products. But at heart, we need to remember the fundamentals of what does the customer want, how do we deliver it, and how do we solve the needs that they have. I think from our perspective, and as Jason, as we always talk about when we have these chats, you know, the algorithms are all there, the cloud computing is all there, the resources are all there, but, you know, fundamentally matching that to the customer journeys and their needs and wants is still where the kind of sweet spot is, and I guess where it'll always be. So that's as much as I can do in about 30 seconds of a sum up, and I guess I'll pass back to Stacey to round off.
Great, thank you so much, Jason and Chris. It's been an honor to hear you share your knowledge and your expertise on the subject. And I'd like to also thank the audience for taking the time to come join us. Just in case you missed anything during the events, you will be receiving an email this afternoon with a recording of the entire thing. So make sure to look out for that. And make sure to look out for our next events in a few weeks' time by following our LinkedIn page, Tune Into Data. The page link will also be included in the email, as well as contact links if you would like to find out more information about Future Anthem. So we look forward to seeing you at the next event. And once again, thank you very much, Chris and Jason.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.